Oh, we're live.
We have eyeballs.
We are eyeball. We have eyeballs. And hi, everybody. Yes, I understand. And I apologize. I don't exactly apologize because everything is moving so fast. This is another live that I am doing today. This one will be a regular fixture with my friend Joel Rubin, author of the briefing book here on Substack, all around amazing human being. You see, my brain has stopped working because I started squeezing a squishy. We started talking about the Mets, but former Assistant Deputy Secretary of State.
Just about. You almost, yeah,
No.
so good. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State.
That's what I said, isn't it?
Well, you said
Assistant Deputy. Okay. Anyway,
Thing.
either way, all around
Thing.
genius on many things, all things, my God, but in particular, foreign policy, national security. Hi, Joel. We're going to be doing this every Friday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. It's kind of a wrap up for the week and a look ahead, but we have so much to talk about. First of all, let's just open with how are you?
It's been a bear. This week has been a bear. I'm good, but man, I am tired.
Yeah.
What a
Well, you've
week.
been doing a lot of TV, and that's because you are a very singular voice out there, as I've mentioned many times, who can explain these incredibly nuanced and complicated issues in a way that people can understand them. So I'm sure you've been very busy, and it's a very valuable service that you provide to the American people in the world over, because you've also been on the BBC quite frequently. Yes. But let's just jump in because there are a lot of
And by the way, can I open my beer?
You can. And in solidarity, like the weirdo that I am, I poured myself a little tiny, like little nip of a Dow's. It's happy hour. Dow's fine ruby Porto. It's a port that I haven't cracked this baby open in a few months. So luckily, port doesn't go bad. But cheers to you, Joel. What are you drinking?
And I've got my gluten-free India Pale Ale because yes, it's a thing.
Oh, I didn't know.
It tastes all right. It's okay. No, I love it. Gluten-free.
Explain this to me because it's beer. And by the way, I love IPA. That is my favorite. But I don't. Walk me through how you take the gluten. I mean, I don't. Okay, but it's good.
I don't know how they take the gluten out. They say from ancient. See, from ancient grains, my eyes still function a little bit.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, gluten-free beer is really tasty, and being gluten-free feels way better than glutinous for me.
Yeah, gluten is a rough one for a lot of people. I don't know what to attribute some of my malaise to, if it's gluten or if it's sugar or if it's, God knows,
6 months of Trump.
Yeah, or if it's not Trump. Most times it's Trump. If it's the gluten or if it's Trump, or if it's the headache that is Bibi Netanyahu. Because let's just not cheers to Bibi Netanyahu, and let's jump right in there. I want to start with well, I want to start with the Nobel Prize shit, because you put up a post and you did a hit on how Bibi is playing Trump with this Nobel Prize shit, and I want to start there, and then I want to get to the article about how Bibi prolonged this horrific war in Gaza to help himself politically. I want to talk about all of that, but let's just start with this Nobel Prize. Can you nominate someone to get a Nobel Prize for bombing somewhere? A Nobel Peace Prize? It feels like that's counterintuitive. I don't know.
So Foreign Policy Fridays are the best because you get to recap the craziness, because it's so impossible to predict what would happen. And I got to tell you, like, when that happened, I was going on MSNBC and I was getting ready to talk policy and serious stuff. And, let's think about, the end of the war, ceasefire, what happened on Iran. And out of nowhere, the unpredictable occurs, which is that the Prime Minister of Israel stands up at a meeting with Trump in the White House at a dinner with his team behind him and Trump's, lackeys behind him, and says, I am nominating you. I'll put in my baritone for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I thought, oh my God, what a fucking genius. Why has nobody else done this? For 6 months, if not 6 years, if not longer, Trump has been begging for a Nobel Prize. Ever since Obama got one. Like when Obama got it in 2009, it freaked him the fuck out. And I think he's been ever since lusting after that Nobel Prize. And he talks about it. And now, out of nowhere, a foreign leader figured out how to play him, had him wrapped around his finger right there. Now, there is literally no chance that Trump gets a Nobel Prize, like zero, less than zero chance, unless some miracle happens and, that none of us see, right? But I'll put it at 0% chance.
Yeah.
But for Netanyahu, it's a twofer. First, from his perspective, Trump has been a great ally. I'll just put it that way, right? From his perspective, Trump has been supporting him and Israel to do what it wants militarily in the region. And for that, he deserves a prize. But, to know how you can ingratiate yourself to Donald Trump, it's always a hard one. Israel doesn't have the $1 trillion to give like Trump got on that trip to the Gulf a couple months ago, where it was like the payments out, 500 billion. No, I want $1 trillion. They don't have that. They don't give corruption gifts like they don't buy a $400 million airplane and hand it to the president's Air Force One. But that Nobel Prize offering, man, that was a winner. And Trump, he's enamored now, and he's not going anywhere.
It's very, very easy to play him, right? It's like you just have to be his fluffer, and you just have to stroke his, God forbid, his ego. Let's say ego, where it wasn't necessarily going to go there. But like you said, there's pretty much zero chance that he's going to get a Nobel Peace Prize, particularly again for launching a missile attack,
for bombing a country. Yeah,
right. But he doesn't care. The fact that he received. I mean, remember when Kim Jong-un sent him that giant fucking envelope and the love letters. We fell in love. We fell in, and he was standing there with this fucking comical envelope. Like that's all it took, right? Like you can play him like a fucking fiddle.
And you know what's happened? Since those love letters, Kim's nuclear program has only gotten more aggressive and bigger and stronger, and he's now sent roughly 50,000 troops to Russia in their war against Ukraine. Like literally, he runs circles around Trump. Have you ever heard Trump a peep out of him against Kim in the last 6 months?
No, remember in the beginning he was like hell and fire and whatever, way back in the first season of the show. Fire and Fury, that's it. And now it's like they just let them go unchecked. And what North Korea has figured out is you can't do jack shit to us once we actually have the goddamn nuke. That's what Iran is rushing to try to fucking figure out because now they're like, well, we didn't have any cards to begin with, and now you've given us more impetus to get them. But I want to stick a fork in all of that because we're not done with Netanyahu, because I want to talk about, was it the New York Times?
Yeah.
This article that you brought to my attention that I had missed, where it talks about the fact that Netanyahu has prolonged what is happening in Gaza to help himself politically. By the way, I looked up a stat. Nearly 10,000 kids under 11 years old have died in Gaza, according to the statistics I saw, since this conflict began. And when the original sin here is the murder of children and innocents, it's really fucking hard to read or hear about the leader of that country prolonging this catastrophic war to help himself politically. But can you dive in there? What is this article talking about?
So a couple of things on this one, right? Like, first of all, the article, it hit me hot in my inbox this morning. It's, I think, coming out on Sunday, so you didn't miss it. In many ways, this is like now going to start becoming the dialogue over the next couple of days. Very much so. It's a thoroughly resourced article, over 100 interviews across Arab diplomats and American officials and Israeli officials, all looking at the decision making of Netanyahu. And, Joe, you and I have been talking about this war since like the early days of it. And we talked about what happened, the attacks and what's taking place in there. And there's really always been this consistent murmur across the last year and a half about Netanyahu's decision making and what's causing him to decide not to go for a full ceasefire. What is the reason, the rationale? There's very little military rationale any longer for what Israel is doing inside of Gaza. They've essentially destroyed Hamas to a point where it can no longer threaten the state of Israel right now. And so what's happening there? And what we see time and again over this period is that within his coalition, there are extreme elements from the furthest of the far of the far of the furthest far of the Attila the Hun wing of Israeli politics, led by two individuals, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who are both ministers in this government, who in any other normal time in Israeli history would have been consigned to the back bench and not allowed in. Uh, I could go on forever about how they got in there electorally. That was the driver. But the bottom line is they're in there and they have leverage on Netanyahu, which is at any time he would potentially move to the center or think about cutting a deal, they would say, then your government's over. And why is that a problem? Governments collapse all the time. Even in Israel, they collapse. And when the government collapses in Israel, you have new elections. And the prime minister who's sitting there just goes through the process. But not in this case, because in this case, if the government collapses, then he is exposed to the cases against him for corruption, for which he's testifying 3 times a week. And he doesn't have the ability to remove the attorney general, as he is trying to do right now, who's trying to put him in jail. So that's all tied up in it. And there's this vignette in the article that really breaks my heart. Back in April of last year, President Biden, if you recall, made a very big announcement about the framework for a ceasefire in April of 2024, of that framework being agreed to. It was like 7-ish months into the war. And this was it. And we've got it. And we're going to now move to a new phase. And Netanyahu was about to publicly concur. And in a cabinet meeting, they got wind of it. And Smotrich said, that's the end of it. That's the end of your government. If you do something, and that's how he said, I'm not doing anything. What are you talking about? There's nothing to see here. And the war continued. And that's what they're stuck in politically. And so it really calls into question if he's even ever able to stop this war because of his personal survival needs. And I'll just close with this. There is the possibility of the opposition giving him a cushion to stay in power. But at this stage, Netanyahu's brand, we might not realize it here, but like 2/3 of Israelis disapprove of him as prime minister. If they had an election today, he would not win the majority again. But people here don't get that. Now, I'm very pro-Israel. I'm very supportive of Israel. I'm very pro-peace. I've always been this way. But I talk to hostage folks or people tied to the hostage families. They're beyond themselves frustrated because they believe that he's prolonging the war and the captivity of those underground in Gaza for this purpose. And that's what this story is about.
I mean, it's so depraved and immoral and inhumane and indecent. It's so gross and self-serving. But for anybody like me, who doesn't necessarily understand how elections work in Israel, you said he's wildly unpopular. He's also got like these criminal charges against him, which Donald Trump is advocating for him to have eradicated, erased, wiped clean, because he's done such heroic things for the people there. But what will it take for the people in Israel to get him out? And if he gets out, is that the only way he faces justice? And if he doesn't get out, is he ever going to face justice?
I think he's in for the next year plus. They have elections next year, in the middle of next year, where they'll have a new parliamentary election. And, at this rate, the way it is, this is unfolding. This is the government they have, as long as he maintains this far-right base in his coalition. So think about it in an American language way. MAGA base. Remember Kevin McCarthy?
No,
Remember that guy?
No, hold on.
Back,
You mean the first Speaker of the House to ever be kicked out of his position by his own party? That
So
guy?
imagine it, Matt Gaetz, but a couple of Matt Gaetzes.
Oh God, that sounds like a terrible no. Thank you.
That's
That
what
sounds
we
like
have right now.
Mhm.
See, so we have like a McCarthy type guy who basically can't stay in power unless he capitulates to the Gateses of the world, and that's what you've got with Netanyahu. So Netanyahu is a complex figure. He actually, let's go wonk. It's Foreign Policy Friday. Historically, people saw him on the right as kind of soft. A lot of times historically, the far right was angry at him. He would agree to American pressure to halt settlements. He would agree to send billions ultimately to Hamas and to Gaza for the civilians. He would not bomb Iran under American pressure. So while there's a perception he's somehow pulling all the levers of power here and is far right, that's not the case. And in fact, there's some more center-left leaders who would call him out and triangulate and say he's too wimpy to bomb Lebanon and really take out Hezbollah and really hit the Iranian nuclear sites. That's the old Netanyahu. Ever since October 7th, plus these trials and the leverage that the far right has on him, he has been reborn as a very hard right nationalist leader who executes on the language that he's been using for years. So I think we're stuck with him in this way right now for quite some time. And the challenge, and this is, I'll get a little wonky, it's all about democracy and elections, right? It's all about who wins power. In Israel, a few years ago, an alternative prime minister won power, Naftali Bennett, who's also a right winger, but also very pro-democracy. And he brought into his government multiple parties, including Arab Israeli parties and center-left parties. And they built it. One of the reasons why is because the right wing in the Israeli politics splintered, and they had a lot of different small parties that got a number of votes, but under a threshold they needed to get to put people into the parliament, the Knesset. So when Bennett was running the Israeli government, Netanyahu was organizing those groups, cutting away the separations, unifying them, and he brought up the vote total so they had more seats. So the next election he was able to win, but he cobbled together the farthest right elements of Israeli politics to get power. And that's why we are where we are today.
And this was after he was charged with crimes, right?
Oh, yeah.
So let for a novice again, let's before we switch gears a little bit and move into Ukraine and also a little bit of Iran. For a novice like me, what were those original charges? What are the charges that Donald Trump wants just wiped clean? And what are the chances that those things just go away, a la January 6th did for Donald Trump?
The Israeli people won't stand for it. They hit the streets pretty damn hard out there. And in fact, I'll get to your question, but the people who were leading the massive protests in favor of democracy and against judicial coup, what Bibi's allies called euphemistically judicial reform, there were hundreds of thousands of them in Israel, many of whom are the leaders of the national security apparatus of Israel and flew the planes that bombed the Iranian nuclear facilities. So, you got to wrap your head around this. This is not an American context, Israel and the Middle East. This is an Israel-Middle East context. The people who are opposed to Netanyahu and want him to go to prison are also willing to sacrifice their lives potentially to protect the state of Israel and to bomb Iranian nuclear sites. All right. So that's the complexity of all of this.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So Bibi was basically charged with corruption, taking illegal gifts and bribes, lots of cigars, lots of trips, having a fat life. And he got caught. And there has been accountability in Israel with previous prime ministers. One of them, Ehud Olmert, who is now a reborn left-wing voice. He was a right-wing ally of Netanyahu. He went to jail for 18 months for corruption. So they have accountability there, which is why Netanyahu's fighting desperately, because he knows he could very well end up in jail because it's been done before. So part of what he did was delay, and then, of course, move to try to reform the judiciary. And in Israel, the judiciary, led by the Supreme Court, is extraordinarily independent, not super political, kind of like a civil service Supreme Court, because they have a variety of layers of laws. I'm sorry, I'm getting really wonky, but let's do this. They have a variety of layers of laws. They do not have a constitution in the state of Israel because according to the deal at the founding of the state of Israel, the religious Jews said, you can't make a constitution. We already have one. It's called the Torah. It's called the Bible. So a lot of administrative laws, Turkish law from before, British law from before, Israeli administrative law, all smashed together, and you have a professional judiciary, and they're the ones that are trying to put him in jail, and he was trying to basically push them out or pack the court. And that is when the street protests occurred. And this is a slow rolling process. And he's been trying every which way to stop them from putting him in jail.
And again, these are some of the charges that Donald Trump has said that he won't even help Israel necessarily.
Right. Which is crazy talk. You're going to put Israel at physical security risk because its prime minister may be held accountable by its own judicial system. How anti-Israel is that? You know,
but those two are a circle jerk. I mean, honestly, those two, like, they love like just jacking each other off all the time, and they're both like birds of a corrupt feather, man. I mean, I remember when Biden won and Trump called Netanyahu while he was still in the Oval Office to trash Biden, and Netanyahu wouldn't do it, and he had the whole call on speakerphone, and I was like, oh, look at this little breakup, because Netanyahu understood, like, you're on your way out, friend. I don't need you anymore. And I thought maybe, because I'm an idiot, right? I thought maybe that relationship was over, but they need each other. And of course, Netanyahu was down in Mar-a-Lago ahead of this past election, and God knows what those two were cooking up. But let's put that to the side for now, because we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to pivot to Ukraine, because that's a whole nother goddamn mess. Let's just start with something that I think is fucking shocking, which is Pete, Secretary of Day Drunkenness.
Don't rip your skin off. It's like,
Pete, Secretary of Day Drunkenness, Hegseth, paused military aid to Ukraine without telling Donald Trump, so that Donald Trump didn't even know it had happened. And this is what I find shocking. Caitlin Collins asked him about it at one of those Dear Leader cabinet meetings, and she's like, if you didn't authorize it, who did? He's like, why don't you tell me? What? First of all, what? Let's just start with, how does that motherfucker still have a goddamn job? And why did he think he could pause aid? And why did he?
Not much of a commander-in-chief. If the president of the United States does not know about the status of the military aid program to our single largest aid recipient in the midst of a hot war with one of our greatest global adversaries, that is not a commander-in-chief in charge. Now, Hegseth apparently has been doing this more than once.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah. And it turns out that there are some Republicans on Capitol Hill, in fact, most, who are like Russia hawks, who are like, what the fuck? What the fuck and what the fuck? Because you're supposed to notify Congress when you withhold funds that have already been appropriated.
Perfect phone call.
I mean, the whole thing.
The first impeachment.
I mean, I don't know if Hegseth even knew he was doing this. I honestly, I got to tell you, you and I both would not be crazy to question his actual hold on the information flow inside the Pentagon, which is the single largest bureaucracy ever created by humankind. Not an easy place, right? Like, it is the biggest bureaucracy human life has ever conceptualized. $1 trillion going to next year. Good God. But he's making cute videos with drones. So I'm sorry.
Talk about that. Why was he walking like he had an M16 up his ass?
But he knows his mark. It's just like the Nobel Prize.
Yeah,
Trump loved the video.
And he thought it was live on Fox at the time. Can we not sleep on the fact that he thought Pete Hegseth did that little drone M16 up his ass, weird saunter in front of the Pentagon? He thought he did it live on Fox? Something that was pre-recorded with makeup and hair and a whole fucking budget? Trump was like, great job on Fox this morning, Pete. What?
So many layers to this.
Yeah, but so many layers.
But let me, I got to say one thing about this whole fiasco of the military aid to Ukraine. It got sprung because Zelensky called as well and called Trump. Now, in the way that things flow, the last thing you want is for a foreign leader to complain to your boss about something that should already be happening, and you're the defense secretary, and you are the person responsible for not telling your boss. Now, for the Ukrainians, this is like life and death. How many Ukrainians died because of this? Probably, we could probably calculate some. If you're the Russians and you've got this guy who's like this loose with information flow, you're happy. And this goes to the bigger picture on Russia, Ukraine, which I do want to make sure we continually point out to folks, which is that today the pressure on Russia is less than it was on January 20th. Not just on a rhetorical level by the president in the way that he, sucks up to Putin, but also on the military level because the aid flow is scattershot and unclear, and on the sanctions level because we have not enacted any new sanctions in 6 months. And to keep sanctions working, you have to keep on moving on them and harvesting and pushing. If you don't, they stagnate and retreat. So the sanctions today are weaker than they were on January 20th. And there's a sanctions bill in the Senate with 85 senators. That means a lot of Republicans.
Yeah.
And the president is not yet asking him to send it. Now, maybe he will on Monday. Maybe he'll decide a peace through strength is a good idea. And that this weak policy really is failing. I don't know. But I think what it means is there's a permissive environment inside the administration on Ukraine policy. And for Hegseth, he may very well logically have assumed he could just hold the aid because nobody cares about Ukraine anyways. That may very well be what's going on.
I mean, it's not like Zelensky even said thank you. But when we get back to those 84, 87 signatures, I forget what you said.
85.
Who are the authors of that bill? Is it Lindsey Graham?
It's like Lindsey Graham's a big leading figure, and all the Democrats are on it too, or a lot of them are on it too.
Right. So again, big Ukraine hawks. Lindsey Graham went to Ukraine several times. I mean, I've seen.
Oh yeah, he's a hawk.
Yeah, thank you to even my congressman Tom Kaine Jr., who, by the way, is a feckless fucking pussy. I'm sorry, apologies. Julie Roginski, my dear friend, thinks I should run against his lazy fucking complicit ass, but I'm not. But he is a big Ukraine hawk, and he let them the last time they suspended aid as part of a reconciliation package or some shit. I don't know if you remember that period of darkness. So he went right along with it. And then the second they finally reinstated it, where was his ass? Over in Ukraine. Give me a goddamn break. But why aren't, I know the answer to this question. I would say, why aren't people like Lindsey Graham beating the drum louder? But my bigger question isn't even about Lindsey Graham. It's about Marco fucking Rubio. Because Marco fucking Rubio has long been one of the loudest supporters of doing whatever it takes to help Ukraine be this breach, be this bulwark against Putin, who Marco Rubio has long criticized and said it was in the United States' best interest. I forget all the terrible things he's correctly identified Putin as, but the list is very long. Back when Marco Rubio still was adjacent to his spine, still when he could smell it when he was downwind, still when it knew his name, which it no longer does. But Marco Rubio knows better. And Marco Rubio does have strong feelings on all of this. Marco Rubio does care about Ukraine. And Marco Rubio, who I think thought he was smart enough, if he wore 62,000 hats, I don't know, head of everything, head of FEMA, head of, the Environmental Protection Agency, head of, shit collecting on those.
Not NASA.
No, and not NASA, because that one goes to the Secretary of Hot Tub Sexportation, friggin' real world road rules. So what's his name?
Duffy.
I want to call him, Sean Duffy. But Marco Rubio, now he's now seen his department slashed, decimated, gutted. The thing he probably thought he could insulate it from if he did enough taint supping, and couldn't, because ultimately they're coming for all of you. Yeah, thank you, Heidi. That's Duffy. Right. But let's just quickly, let's talk about Marco Rubio's abandonment of every core principle he ever seemed to have, and how much worse that's going to get, and how much worse that is for America right now, and for Ukraine.
Well, you're leading into, I think, what is the most heartbreaking news of the day. But before I get to that, I'll say, I was on TV yesterday on MSNBC, and I was asked about Rubio, and they showed the video of him meeting with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. And I think you could see Rubio's face. Like, it looked about as bad as when he sunk into the couch during the Oval Office meltdown where Vance and Trump were castigating Zelensky. Like, he looked like death had warmed over, and it did, because that's Lavrov and that's Mr. Death.
Yeah.
And so there he is having to negotiate with this guy, knowing full well this guy is a merchant of death, kleptocratic, megalomaniacal, multi-billionaire of Russia, right? Like, everything that Rubio has spent his entire career opposing is personified in two Russian men, Putin and Lavrov. Lavrov, for folks who don't know, has been the Putin wingman since the beginning.
He
And
was
he
in
ain't
the,
going
he was
anywhere.
in the Oval in the first season of
He was in the Oval smiling. He made his mark. And so Rubio has, I actually felt a little sympathy for Rubio on that one, because that is one nasty, nasty job to do. And he got nothing out of that meeting, predictably. But to the other really bad news, and this is, you can blame Rubio for this quite a bit too, and also the broader administrations. It just came down within the last couple hours that massive firings are taking place at the State Department. About 15% of the staff. I've been in touch with people trying to figure out what's going on. They have eliminated bureaus that focus on, I don't know, trite things like global climate change and democracy and human rights. Gone, zeroed out, dead. Now, the climate office in the Environment Bureau was started 35 years ago by an environmental president named George H.W. Bush. All right. And they killed that.
Texas.
You remember the ozone fights? That guy got rid of the hole in the ozone and put us into the Rio climate process. And it was like he was environmental president like Nixon. Well, not Trump. It's gone. They're firing people in every office. They're firing people even in offices that allegedly advance their agenda, like in the energy sector. They're getting rid of energy experts and energy officers who can help us export energy overseas. I thought we were supposed to be energy export on steroids. How's that going to happen? So 15% of the State Department staff fired today, in addition to the USAID death. And why did that happen? Well, there are a lot of reasons why, but the big reason why this week on a tactical level is that the Supreme Court greenlit it. All right. And so we'll probably see more firings across the federal government because the Supreme Court basically said you can do it. And I just got to tell you, on a personal level, I have fielded calls from friends, State Department folks who are losing their jobs. One woman in her mid 40s, maybe early 40s, maybe 9-10 years of service at most. An expert, multilingual, worked with Afghan refugees, worked in the field, represented our country, advanced our national security. She's now without a job and without health care. Fired. Not for performance. They're firing patriots. They're firing people who make our world safer. They're firing people who chose a career of public service to all of us. They're firing our best. And these are the things that when I came into government as a civil servant for my first 7 years in government, we were still rebuilding after a decade later, after there was a hiring freeze. This is not a hiring freeze. This is a firing of 15%. And I don't know how we recover as a government. And I know I'm going long, but I'll say this. When you see crises like Texas, and you know that civil servants and federal employees who are experts in predicting weather and engaging local governments in recovery through FEMA, the FAA in dealing with like flight crashes overseas and going out. These are the people who keep us safe. These are inherently governmental jobs. Elon Musk might not value them and might think they don't make money in the private sector, but these are jobs that when things go wrong and you don't have people in there, disasters happen. So the cost now for recovery in Texas, forget about the horrific humanitarian loss of life. It's going to be probably hundreds of millions, if not billions. So they think they're saving money by firing a few civil servants here or there. they're going to end up costing us. And this boost in our civil service on State Department and the national security apparatus came after September 11th as a result of there being a very weak civil service infrastructure before 9/11 due to the hiring freezes of the Reagan era. And so we just weren't a highly performing government then, and we saw the results. And so I'm very worried about our national security now because of these firings.
I mean, somebody asked me in the chat if I was feeling well, and honest to God, like listening to some of this, and hey, King Ray, buddy,
Sorry for ruining your Friday.
oh yeah, no, I mean, let's yeah, well,
Foreign Policy Friday.
that's
Yeah.
why, that's why we have Ruby Ports at 5:30 in the afternoon, evening. But no, I mean, when you hear Joel, who is not exactly a hyperbolic, histrionic type of person, right? Joel is not prone to exaggeration or dramatization. Hey, Joel shoots it really straight, and he's actually, if like Joel would laugh because he's actually much more conservative than somebody like me who is often like, Jesus Christ, Joel, did you see this? And he's like, calm down, like that's fine, it's not as bad as you think it is. And I'm like, but the sky's falling, and Joel's always like, well, it's only falling a little bit, it's not falling the way you think it is. It's actually, maybe it's not as bad as I think. This is not what you just said. And like but the thing is, anybody with a set of eyes who's paying attention could probably reach the same conclusions without as much insight as you have. So I don't mean to undermine what you've said because you're so fucking smart. But like it's a logical conclusion to what they're doing with USAID, and now with this, they are leaving us so vulnerable, so exposed to national security threats, but they're doing it domestically too. And so my little brain goes a couple of places, which is terrified and anxious and worried about my kids, right? And like everybody is. But then my brain goes to somebody, I think somebody put it in the chat also. The whole fucking point. Sometimes I honestly think that the whole fucking point of this is to leave us vulnerable so that maybe there will be terrorism on our soil again. Maybe there will be more catastrophes that terrorize places like the Hill Country in Texas, places like North Carolina. Catastrophes are going to happen all over the country. And some part of my brain is like, maybe the chaos really is the point. The destabilization really is the goal, because in that chaos, they can seize even more power. I mean, we're already seeing them basically turning places like Los Angeles into police states, into armies, they're mounting ICE agents on horses, like cosplaying like Timu fucking Lord of the Rings to storm playgrounds for propaganda videos, and they're running into fields to arrest mothers with their children. But like, tell me I'm not losing my shit by thinking, like, long term, like, don't suffer from a lack of imagination, as my friend Michelle Kinney always says, but this is the whole point. What else could it be?
Well, this is the deep, dark concern about it. And I'll take a step further in a way where when you hear folks in the far right complain about the deep state, right? The Steve Bannons of the world, the deep state. What they're basically saying is that the American government, the civil service, the patriotic public sector employees in the federal service, they are somehow a deep state to suppress us, whereas they are actually the guarantors of liberty and of our constitutional system and our republic. When you take them out, you then weaken that structure. And the deep state has always been the target. Project 2025 is a book about how to eliminate the deep state, how to get rid of the patriotic civil service that works for the American people and the Constitution, and not the president alone, not the dear leader. And so when people talk about guardrails against autocracy, there are many different guardrails. One core guardrail is a civil servants, a bureaucracy that is responsive to the public, to the Congress, to the Constitution. And that is what they are taking away. And the problem with that is that even if they're not trying to do it to create chaos, to make us all have shitty lives, right? Like, let's just say they're not. That could be and may very well end up being a consequence, right? So even if it's not intentional, let's just say they just don't like there being a civil service of people who aren't loyal to the president because he should be in charge. Let's just say it's benign like that. There still is a consequence. And if a terror attack happens, and it could, on the watch of Donald Trump, because, oh, I don't know, we're firing 15% of our intelligence community staff, turning them upside down, inside out, making them fearful of their careers, thinking about whether or not they're going to get tapped on the shoulder tomorrow by Mr. Riff, reduction in force. And so they're not looking for the next bin Laden, they're looking for the next, HR hack. This is the danger. And so the result is the same. And then if that does occur, you know who they're going to blame? You know who Trump's going to blame if an attack occurs? The government, the civil service, the deep state, not himself. And so it's a very different vision of governance. And we can all have our own independent assessments of what we think they're really trying for. But to me, the practical real world impacts are severe and dangerous. American standing globally is plummeting. Countries around the world don't view us as a reliable ally or partner. They are looking to others, meaning our adversaries like China, to backfill a lot of their financial needs that we were providing for them. I just got a note a little bit earlier that we fired all of the staff that help people who are evacuated from Afghanistan sitting in our airbase in Qatar. We fired all of them, right? Like, we're turning our backs on everybody. And that has consequences. And that is not the American people. If you ask them in poll after poll, they'd say, no, I don't want to do that. It's just like a lot of these MAGA people. Like, no, I want my health care. I actually would like to keep my Medicaid, They don't want us to turn on our allies, but that's what we're doing.
Well, we are going to continue this conversation because the next time we talk, which will be next Friday at the same time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, we are going to talk about how, Joel, we can rebuild some of this and how long it will take, if and where it is possible, because we are all probably equally fearful that it's not possible to reclaim some of this soft power and global partnerships and alliances. Although I am an eternal optimist, much to my
I am an
detriment.
optimist too, despite how I sound.
Yeah. But we're going to have this conversation again. We're going to continue this conversation. It's going to be an ongoing conversation because these things are always unfolding. It's not static. And to everybody that is a Department of State employee that has been doing the work in the civil service, it's near and dear to my heart. I'm not going to go into that too much, but Joel knows why. Thank you for everything that you have done for this country. That was not political. That was towards the end of keeping us safe and keeping the guardrails in place. I am sorry for what has happened to you. Just know that there are many, many, many of us out here who are appreciative of people we will never know, who did jobs we will never understand, because the whole point was that we didn't know them because they kept us safe. And those are the real patriots. And I think that they can't go without at least acknowledging for your friend who lost her job and her health insurance. They deserve better. This is one of these constant threads throughout so much of what's happening right now, is that good people are paying the price for some kind of weird political fucking vengeance agenda, and bad people are being rewarded. And we are going to continue this conversation because we have to. And you, Joel, are such a fucking asset to the world for speaking about these things so clear-eyed, so succinctly, passionately, honestly, realistically, and soberingly, even though we've had half a beer and 3 sips of a tawny port or ruby port. But I'm so glad that you're going to spend these Fridays with me having these conversations, because I ask questions I don't understand. And hopefully these wonderful 993 people who get to listen to your wisdom and your insight and your perspective on things feel a little bit more empowered by the knowledge that you've imparted. So I know I do, even if it's terrifying as fuck.
Joe, you're a national treasure. I said it once,
Yeah.
I'll say it again. Thank you. Hey, everybody, thanks for jumping in on this stuff. And these Foreign Policy Fridays, are fun also because, frankly, a lot of things happen right at the end of the week in foreign policy, and things that shock the system. In Washington, there's always a sort of a data dump of bad news that kind of gets shoved out the door right about 5 o'clock on Friday. And a lot of times it's tied to foreign affairs. So if we can time this right, starting our show, our live at 5:30, we'll be right there with the wave of the bad news. But we invite everybody above 21 to have a drink with us. I've got some daughters in the house who tried to steal my beer, and I would not let them. Uh,
Not yet. Not yet. Not yet.
I mean, I didn't let them, but then I fell asleep on the couch, so I don't know what really happened. But that said, could talk
Yeah.
about daughters all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, I
3
got
of
one of
them.
them too. Yeah. Yeah, I'm one of 4 girls and a boy. So I feel your pain. Yeah. Yeah.
But
But
to sound cheesy, we do this for our children, but we actually really do. And I always have hope. And why do I have hope? Because I believe in our country, and I believe in our people, and I believe in our system, and I believe in all the beautiful things that we've created here, and that's what gives me hope. So I'm just excited to be with you on this journey show. Thanks.
me too. And yeah, we do it for our kids. I can speak to that about your heart and your nature. And friends, believe me when I tell you that is one of the most altruistic human beings you will ever meet in your life. Purely driven by actually making the kinds of changes that we all seek, and by his beautiful daughters. One is prettier than the next, guys. And I do this for my little rugrats from not so little. My son is 15. It's shocking. He's going to have his permit soon. But yeah. People say that foreign policy doesn't, move the needle, and I just don't believe that is actually the reality that we occupy. We have to talk about all of it because there are immediate impacts on our children, and we want to leave this world a better place than we found it. And one way to do that is to have conversations and educate people, like we are going to do right here on Substack every Friday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Whether it's a Pepsi that you're drinking, like one of our friends in the chat, or a Ruby Port that I opened, and thank God it's still fine, or a gluten-free beer, whatever it is, join us, and we'll try and learn a little bit more together. And I don't know, knowledge is power. So yeah, thanks, Joel. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Joe.
all
Thanks,
1,000
everybody.
people. We will see you guys next week. Stay tuned. This is an ongoing conversation. Democracy is a participation sport, so we're all going to play a role here. Thanks, Joel. Thanks, guys. Have an amazing weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.